Alright, so this is my fully procedurally made humanoid creature. Um, I did a complete rework. I started from scratch, ground zero, uh, and remade everything. I did not remake the wings yet. Haven't completed that yet. There's something else I'm going to work on beforehand. That just keeps nagging at me. So I'm not going to redo the wings yet. That these are good enough. I have redone the feathers, um, which I found a bug in Blender uh, with. See, these are uh, basically just a line curve turned into a mesh with more line curves sticking out. I tried using the particle system, um, which is what this is, and then using spotted on points. But if you copy over an object with a particle system into a geometry node's object, it doesn't transfer the particle system. So it ends up just being a stick. Um, so I had to build these out in geometry nodes itself instead of using the particle system. And the only reason this is able to even display on here is because these are all instances. And yes, these are all instances of the same object, yet they're a different color. Isn't that awesome? I'll see if I can. Yeah, it is a little bit laggy because, even with being instances. Oh, look, it's a different color now. These were red on this side. A little bit laggy. Now they're red again. Yeah, it's super laggy when I've got it on. And that's only because of these right here, and they're all instances. Uh, like if I turn off the wings, I mean it's it's still a little laggy. It was there you go. It normally looks like it's normally like smooth like butter. We'll put the wings back on. Everything is generative. It regenerates. Actually, let's turn the wings off. So I can show you the mesh topology. I rebuilt the mesh from the ground up, and you can see mesh topology, um, like even in the face. This thing is not behaving well. Uh, like at the topology looks a little bit strange. That's because it added in the horns. If I take away the horns, I mean it's like the topology in this part doesn't really matter because it's not going to be animated when it's got the horns. Like the animation will stop like right here. But if I turn off the horns, if I can find them, there we go. Turn off the horns. See how it's got a different topology. It regenerates the topology based on what is being added to the mesh. And you see how it's instant. I mean, so if I go into geometry nodes, I can actually got the timings turned on, so you can see. I got it back. I got it back way out. Um, 81 milliseconds. Actually, that's a little bit slow. 90 milliseconds, 85, 84. So 80 to 90 milliseconds. Um, that must be including the horns because it wasn't. It was only like 70 before. So what is if I turn the horns off? Did I? Yeah, let's turn that back up to 0. 77. Okay. So the base mesh is the tail. That's right. Let's turn the tail off. Da, 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 da. Tail. Turn the tail off. 82, 87, 85. Still about 80 milliseconds. Okay, so apparently I've added enough stuff in to knock it from 70 to 80. Actually, that should, well, it's still 0.1. You see how this one has no markings because it just doesn't even try. Like I got a switch in here, you disable it and it puts absolutely nothing. No geometry at all. The wings should do the same thing, but I think that's actually inside here. The wing type, like there is nothing. 0 is nothing. And I have the different types of wings that I will have to work on eventually, but it is a lot of work for the wings that I didn't realize how complicated a wing is. Everyone's like, oh yeah, the wings should be simple. No, they're really not. Arms and legs are more simple than wings, strangely enough. But this is the base mesh, which is 77 milliseconds. So what is adding the rest? Now it's got me curious. Oh, this little thing right here is how I get the armature to work. Because this adds in from the base mesh. Control H, there we go. Adds in the original from the base mesh, or from the original mesh of the object, because this is originally an icosphere. See, edit. Yeah, see, it's just an icosphere. And what it does is it transfers just the first point into this object. And it is a workaround that only works in 3.0 to one of the 3.2 Blender, 3.2 beta versions. In the release of 3.2 is where they break it. But in this particular version, 3.2 beta, it still works. And what this does is it transfers the vertex groups and matches them up with the point attribute names. So if you have these two the same thing in both locations, you can set them inside geometry nodes and they will transfer to the vertex groups. At some point in 3.2, they break that. But for now, it works. And even with it broken, I think I have a workaround where I wouldn't need vertex groups. Like I can't access the bones, so there's no way for me to write a script that matches the bones. But what I can do, hold on, is make a second rig that is made of, instead of bones, it's made of actual individual objects. And then, like, meta rig. What I would do is I would match up an object, just a cylinder or something, that is fully controlled by this. Just a 1-to-1 ratio with this. And then I can write a script inside geometry nodes that reorients the positions of the points with the object. And the object would be controlled by the bone. It's a really roundabout way of doing it, but it should work. I haven't tried it. Don't plan on trying it for quite a while because it's really, really intense program. Involving a lot of, not only just a lot of math, but I would have to do that for each and every single teeny tiny little bone. Now I wouldn't have to rewrite the script for each one. Basically, I could have one node group with an input of a bone name and then an input of the vertex group, or actually, since the vertex group doesn't work, it would be the name of the stored named attribute, and then all the math that orients it based on that. It's possible. I'm pretty sure I can do it. I'm pretty sure I can do it. It just take me a little bit of time to work it out. And then I can use any version of Blender. But the thing is, if I do that, I wouldn't be able. It wouldn't work in anything other than Blender. Um, or would it? Actually, it still might. If I made the if I added that in as the um, real objects. Huh. Oh no, I'd have to really think about it. But this is supposed to be, showing off the new mesh, and these are the hands and the fingernails. I mean, look at that cuticle. And what do I have? The subdivision. Okay, subdivision is turned on. Good. The hair's not implemented yet, and the fur's only on the tail, which I can turn the tail back on. Tail, tail, tail. Tail, tail, who's got the tail? Did I just miss it? There it is. See, nice fluffy tail. Yeah, see, now it's still working real smooth like butter now. I don't know why it wasn't working earlier. Um, I mean, this is made in geometry nodes, completely and totally made in geometry nodes. The only thing that's not made in geometry nodes is the skin tone, which is still procedurally made in the shading editor. Um, I mean, it's a math formula that mixes in a bunch of stuff, like the subsurface is this crazy craziness right here. um, hmm. I did have the base color tied into something. I must have changed it at some point. Let's see, shading, geometry nodes. And I know people love to see there is a lot of geometry on that friggin' ear. That ear took me 8 hours to make. Yep, just the ear took 8 hours. But the results just speak for themselves. I'm quite quite happy with the results. And you see how fast this is going. um, I mean, look at all the detail that is in this arm and this hand and this finger. I mean, I've even got little stretch marks in between the fingers. The fingernails, like I can control the length of the. That's one of the mods that I do have implemented right now is the fingernails. I can change the length of them. I've got to demonstrate in another video. I can change the length of them. It actually adds in new geometry so that it keeps the correct shape regardless of how long it is. You can also increase or decrease the sharpness of it. That's the only mods that I have implemented right now. The toes are a bit wonky. I have to fix those at some point, but they're just not a high priority right now. I mean, I'll show you the topology of the hand and of the fingernails and the fingers. Like when you increase the length, it adds more geometry. So the squares don't get very much longer. They won't get any more than twice the size. Like as soon as Actually, far less than that. It's like 1/10 the size. It's like as soon as it increases where there's room for an additional one this size, it'll add one in and regenerate it. Anytime you make any changes, it regenerates the entire mesh from scratch. It rebuilds it when there's any teeny tiny change, and it's like less than a tenth of a second. Let's see, and you can see in more detail the correct posturing of the arms, the elbows, the spine. Like you can really see it here. Um, got the shoulders. I believe I got the shoulders correct. Um, it's like I think I have everything correct. Everything looks like really good to me, but I have not been studying anatomy as much as other people have, so I might have some things wrong. Um, I did study other people's topology to learn how to do this, but I figured out why it's done like this. Because when I was doing animating this model, like I didn't have additional topology in the knee, and it would make some really terrible like seams across the knee. So I understand why the additional topology is there. Um, Ignore the toes. I, the toes were the last thing I was making, so they are quite literally the fingers. So they are just fingers. They are some monkey paws. Uh, they are they are quite literally fingers just attached. At some point, I will go and reshape these correctly, but the reason I use the fingers is because the topology is correct, and it just takes a really long time to create the topology in addition to shaping it. So if I can borrow the topology and just reshape it, it saves me many hours and hours of labor. Because yes, just making one finger takes several hours. Um, but the thing is, because it's procedural, once I have one done, I don't ever have to do it again. The wing I haven't redone yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to redo it. I probably will because it's a little bit too simplistic. Um, so I'll probably redo the wing so that it has a really good topology like this. Um, but I haven't seen any 3D models with a topology for a wing because most wings topology is just really super simple because no one really cares about birds' wings, I guess, or they have feathers on top, so it doesn't matter what the topology looks like underneath. I'm guessing. I don't know. I'll eventually get around to it. Uh, One thing is I have not done the inside of the mouth. Um, wow, this kind of looks creepy. So I haven't done the inside of the mouth other than just like the inside of the lip, and I haven't done the inside of the eyes yet. I'll get to that eventually. But what I will be working on first, or next, I should say, is a full leg morph for to add in satyr legs, satyr, satyr legs, basically. Um, so it will. I think they will basically look like the rear legs of a horse. So I'll use that as kind of a. I'll use horse references to kind of get the general shape for the horse legs, and I'll basically do the same method that a shape key does, but it'll be in geometry nodes. So I will change the positions of the points on the legs and have a second copy, and it will have like a slider, and it will mix the current position with the new position, just like a shape key does. Um, so that is no different than a regular model. So that's just a shape key. That's not impressive. Like, who cares? I mean, it is kind of neat that you can do something like that. But what happens when you want a centaur? What do? Do you just take a human model and stick it on a low resolution horse model? I mean, is that what you do? And then fidget with a whole bunch of stuff to make the seams look kind of right? Or with mine, I can do that in geometry nodes and have an entire mesh, horse mesh, um, that I can lop off the head and seamlessly attach the body to the horse legs, um, and I can even have it animated where it builds out the horse model like one row at a time in full detail until it gets to the legs. So people can have a slider where they can visually see the human morph into a centaur. I mean that would be great for animation for people who want to have that. And the topology will just work because it's all generative. Um, and there's stuff like that where, like when I add in the wings, um, you know, people have to do that manually, and it's really time consuming if you want something other than just a basic human. There's no real, character generators for anything other. Oh, let's turn this off because that's getting annoying. There's no character generators for anything other than humans. And some stats on this. So, the file size for just the human is 52 megs. Okay? But because it is um, a fully geometry nodes object, it does not need to store all of the positions of all the points. It does not need to store because the shader or the texture is procedural. It does not need to store the data for the texture. Because it's procedural, it has infinite resolution. That's how procedural textures work. Infinite resolution. Um, and so what I did is I tested to see how big a file would be if I had multiple copies. So this is 52 megs, and each additional copy, you can change the settings however you want, is 4.2 megs. So, or is it 0.42? If I had I remember if I put in 1,000 of them, and the file size went up by 500 megs. So 1,000 completely unique characters that you're actually saving the data. So you don't need to save the data if you're using like a random generator. You don't need to save the data of each individual creature, um, except if you literally had 1,000 of them on the screen at one time and you didn't want uh, anything to change between saves. You could save the entire thing. It's only 500 megs. Yeah, 1,000, and these are 137,000 faces. So a model, 1,000 models with 137,000 faces with infinite resolution texture for 500 megs. And this thing, when I get it done, will be able to be goblins, orcs, trolls, elves, centaurs, um, whatever the thing with the spider, not spider. Oh yeah, I can do spider too. Like centaur with the spider legs instead, or spider body legs instead of horse body legs. Um, but what's the thing with the snake lower body? I don't know the names of it. I can add that in. anything that exists, I can put all of that into a single model, and the file size will be tiny, where you can have your entire uh, game will be less than a gig, and no matter how many, I mean, it might be like 5 gigs once you have in thousands of stuff of each different thing. Um, but I mean, if you had infinite resolution the other way, which you can't possibly have that because of infinite file size, um, I mean, it would be astronomical to have high res. But being a procedural texture, infinite resolution, and it takes nothing. Um, and I mean, to me, this texture, as soon as it gets some fuzziness to go away, actually we might be able to see it in EV. It doesn't look too terribly good in EV because it doesn't have subsurface scattering. I mean, that doesn't look terrible for EV. I don't know if that would be. It's not great for EV, but in cycles, it looks pretty good. And anything that has subsurface scattering, I mean, this texture would look really good, in my opinion. I have no idea what other people's opinion are. Haven't asked. Um, and everything can be exceptionally high quality. I mean, I can make it very high resolution with the subsurface modifier. Um, which, you know, it, it would still have to be a reasonable resolution for the mesh. Like you couldn't turn this up too terribly high because it does have to create when you import it into a video game. It does have to create a regular mesh. Like you couldn't use this directly. There's a software called AlterMesh that can import it directly from geometry nodes. Like you can use uh, you can use AlterMesh and have a script inside of like Unreal Engine that calls up Blender geometry nodes, feeds it all the settings that you like, all the inputs. Like you could just randomize all the inputs, and it would create a model and automatically import it. Um, extremely fast. So, but it would still keep the infinite resolution material, I believe. Because I think it would import the procedural textures. I don't know that for certain, but I mean, it should be able to. And so, this would matter. Um, the thing about that is, it doesn't have to store the entire mesh ever. Like, it doesn't have to store the point data. It will use it while it is running. So, the GPU still has to know the mesh data. But when you save the game, you only need to know the inputs. And when you reload the game, it will generate the mesh upon loading it back up. So your save files will be tiny. Um, your download data would be tiny. I know it's not that big of a deal nowadays, but still, when you have games that are almost a terabyte to download, you know, if you have broadband, it's not that big of a deal, but it does get annoying when, your hard drive is just absolutely maxed from a single game, and your bandwidth takes, 20, 30 minutes to download a game. Uh, and that's if you have really high internet speed. But, for the people who live outside of that, it's a game changer when your file sizes go from, 120 gigs down to 120 megs. I mean, it's if you still live in an era where you get barely higher than dial-up, or even if you're on like DSL where it's like 2 megs a second, um, it makes a difference. And if you have a cheap computer, it makes a difference. Um, I just love that hair system. That is just. I'm holding shift. There we go. Shift. There we go. Hey, that first system is just absolutely incredible. Um, the wings, I'll turn the wings back on so you can see those. No, 4 is the bird wings. Yeah, that's. Oh wow. The instance. Okay, so the bird wings are just not going to work. Not the way they are. Uh, yeah.